hands-on with Saber from Saberduelgaming. And yes, this is the show where we take a look at some of my gaming merchandise and I get hands-on with actual hands with these items. And today, as you may have guessed, at least I hope you guessed, because otherwise I'd be concerned, we are taking a look at Zelda merchandise, featuring stuff from a wide range of all the Legend of Zelda games, although there is a bit of a theme. So let's take a look at some of these items and where their history, background, etc. comes from. So we are going to start with the Master Sword. This is a sword seen throughout many of the Zelda games and is one of the coolest weapons in all of gaming. The Master Sword is something I'd been looking for a very long time. I'd even travelled to actual armories to try and get a replica version of this, which we'll talk a little bit about more going forward. However, all the versions I'd seen had been rather fake and tacky looking. Sorry to those that made them. I think the fact that this is very much a visually video game sword meant that if you made it for real, it just looked a bit tacky. Or if you made it look like it was a much more realistic sword, it just didn't look like the Master Sword. So eventually I got a hold of this version. Shout out to a friend of mine, Ross, who actually bought it for me. This was a gift from him. This is very much a toy, as you can see. It's not trying to be a real sword, but this does give it a much more faithful feel. If we pull the sword out, we can see the sword itself. It's a nice, relatively sturdy plastic, but it does look just like the real thing. We've got all the proper engravings and markings on it, and it's so much fun. A great deal of fun, you could say, to use and to handle. The scabbard part of it is equally detailed with the fantastic Triforce part here. It's just really enjoyable. It's not trying to be something super realistic. Instead, it's faithful to the sword in the game. And that makes it absolutely perfect for me, and one of my favourite pieces of gaming merchandise. Whilst we're talking about the Master Sword, I feel the need to link into this one. Pardon the link pun, that actually wasn't on purpose, but it worked. This was one that someone bought for me from York. Now, interestingly enough, I mentioned earlier about trying to find a real version of the sword, an actual replica sword, but in York Armory, one of the many places I'd looked for this, again, versions of it in a more sort of real steel feel, that all rhymed, just didn't quite cut it. But this was a miniature version of it in a rather cool little stand. And the sword does come out. It's steel, it's shiny, it looks fantastic. It is brilliant. We've got a fair bit of detail to it. It is very much sort of like a letter opener type thing, but still, it's a shame that when it was in a much bigger scale for a real person like me to hold, it just didn't look it. I think of the fact that the blue handle, these bits all in blue and the yellow here, it just looked a little bit tacky. That was just my opinion. Nothing to do with the quality of work the York Armory themselves, shout out to them, actually put into it. But this version here was absolutely amazing. It may still be there to this day, so if you ever go, feel free to check it out. Also, do check out some of their other replica swords from video games. They do some really good stuff, even if not all of them are actually for me. The fact that this has its own little display stand just makes it extra cool. None of this is official Zelda merchandise, of course, but it's still fantastically enjoyable. Up next, we have a very strange little piece of jewellery here. I don't actually know where I got this from. I'm not sure. It could have been from HMV. HMV did do an awful lot of video game merchandise, little necklaces and stuff like this. But we can see the Triforce on this. This is actually proper official merchandise, I believe. So I am going to guess this was from HMV. This is one of those things that I've had just hanging up above my games consoles for quite a while. I couldn't even tell you when I bought it, but it is really beautiful. This is a really good example of how the markings, logos, designs from within the Zelda games are just visually stunning. I can understand why people would get a marking like this done as a tattoo. It's just really nice, even if you didn't actually know the game. If you saw this, you would be really impressed with it. It has a sort of Aztec feel to it for me. The fact that it's on gold and black only helps with that. Not necessarily the Triforce itself, but these sorts of like rays of light almost looking like wings with these feet. It does almost look like it's making a bird shape here. It's just really nice. This is not something I've ever worn. I'm not walking around with gaming jewellery hanging around my neck, sort of like an 8-bit version of Mr. T. It's just something I like to have hanging up. Yeah, quite impressive. How could this possibly be complete with at least one version of Link? Now, this is a Link stuffed toy, nice and squishy, reasonable size. Got the shield on the back, how cute is that? And of course the Master Sword, sort of, jeez, literally stuck to his hand. This I picked up in a place called Preston at a comic convention. I'd gone there with a friend of mine, and this was one of the items that I'd picked up. It was just so cute. I have a thing for gaming merchandise, obviously, and when I see something that stands out as a little bit different, it just becomes a must-buy. Stuffed toys don't exactly scream video game merchandise all the time. Certain things will do, such as Animal Crossing, but if you remember in the previous one of these I did, we actually had a Resident Evil Licker. This is similar to that. It just scratches an itch of mine to see these characters in a much more tactile, squeezable way. This is actually Link from, I believe, The Wind Waker? Let me know below if I'm wrong on that. Is it The Wind Waker? It was certainly when they started shifting the design to the more cel-shaded graphics. We saw that on the Nintendo Wii and also on the Nintendo DS 3DS, which we're going to come to very shortly. But this is a really cool little item. I just love the fact that we've got this sort of hard felt shield on his back. Yeah, it's just kind of adorable. The soft squishy hair, the sort of blonde emo look he's got going on. Yeah, priceless. Up next, we have an absolutely essential game. Unfortunately, I no longer have my original version of this. I did have it for the Nintendo 64. I also had it on a bonus disc on the Nintendo GameCube. Both of those I have sadly lost over time, but I'm still quite happy to have this version of the game. The Nintendo 3DS released a fair few games from older consoles that were then put into 3D, and many of them it just wasn't required, but this version was beautiful. Even the box is stunning. Beautiful artwork, the golden design on it. The graphics of the game still stood up fantastically well when it was released on the Nintendo 3DS. You can see we've got the game in there. We've got all the booklets and everything still in place. And if we take a look, there is actually reversible artwork, which is really, that's just a very nice touch. I am sad that I don't still have my Nintendo 64 version of the game, but I do have the 2D version of it on my Nintendo Switch, which is the version I tend to play most now. But this 3DS version of it was fantastic. It was genuinely worth seeing the world in 3D. Absolutely stunning, just gorgeous. Beautiful game. But not the pièce de résistance. This is my favourite piece of Zelda merchandise. This is my own Nintendo 3DS, the Zelda Limited Edition. This was one of my favourite consoles. It was a gorgeous console. The Nintendo 3DS was often very, very underrated, underappreciated. The way that the graphics only were 3D from particular angles did hinder it somewhat, but by God, once you saw certain games in 3D on this console, seeing them in 2D just didn't work anymore. And this version of the Nintendo 3DS, the black and gold designs, the little touches around the edges there, it's a work of art. Here we see the same logo that we had on the necklace there. We've got the ocarina there and there, the harps here in the corner. There's not much to say about this version of the 3DS console, other than the fact that it's beautiful. I was always tempted to get a Nintendo 3DS, but when I saw this, I just had to own it. It was absolutely stunning. In fact, I got this and the Ocarina of Time 3D you see in the background at the same time. The game plays wonderfully on this console as well. To be able to play it on a Zelda limited edition console always felt a little bit elite to me, which isn't something I normally like, but in this case, I'll take it. This isn't every piece of Zelda merchandise that I have. There are a few stragglers around there as well. Maybe I'll come back to some of those again in the future, under different themes. But for now, these are some of my favourite pieces of Zelda gaming merchandise. But what do you think? Are there any of these items that you've got? Are there any of these items you'd be particularly excited to have? What about other Zelda pieces of merchandise? Do you have something that you think I'd be interested in? Please comment down below, let me know. And if you've got other ideas of things you'd like to see, other themes you'd like to see in hands-on with Saber, just let me know. Until next time, take the high ground and have a great evening.